It is extremely disturbing and extremely scary when in a democracy like ours, a sitting judge gets murdered. And the news that emerged from Jharkhand with the visuals that came out has every indication that that is what happened to the Additional Sessions Court Judge of Dhanbad, Judge Anand, who went out for a walk early in the morning. Justice Uttam Anand around 8 a.m. got out for a walk and a jog when this vehicle, one 6-seater auto tempo, seems to have deliberately swerved on this empty road to where the judge was walking, knocked him down and simply drove away. A sitting Additional Sessions Judge, Justice Anand, who got out in the morning for a walk, mowed down in broad daylight. How brazen can the criminals in our country get? How brazen is this act where you don't even think twice before mowing down a judge? Now, he was rushed to the hospital, but sadly he couldn't be saved on time. His family has been claiming that it is murder with the mafia, local mafia, which may be involved. The Jharkhand High Court has stepped in, taken suo motu cognizance, and said that they, on a day-to-day basis, they are going to track the investigation by the Special Investigative Team. The court has stepped in and said, we will track every day what investigation is being done. And the court has even warned that if the investigation is not to our satisfaction, we are going to order a CBI inquiry. But what do you say about a state's law and order when the judiciary is under threat? Now, there are many claims, there are several speculations on what could be the possible motive, what could have triggered this, who could be behind it. We don't know. I'm just going to give you one example of what is being speculated. Justice Anand had rejected the bail of an alleged contract killer who was from Uttar Pradesh, is currently lodged in the Dhanbad jail. Now, it was an extremely high-profile case with that man having several high-profile connections. And many say that it is because of this case that maybe somebody wanted to target him. We don't know. And frankly, it doesn't matter. But what is concerning is that if judges in our country are not able to do their job, are not able to mete out justice, are not able to do a fair decision making on the crucial cases they sit on because their life is under threat, then what kind of justice will we be fighting for? Think about that. I say good evening to the panelists who join me with a lot more insights into the state of affairs in Jharkhand and specifically Dhanbad. So, Priya Bhattacharya, General Secretary for JMM, Tuhin Sinha of the BJP, Dr. Anshul Avajit of the Congress Party, Mr. Yashovardhan Azad, former IPS and Central Information Commissioner, Professor Ajay Kumar Jha, political analyst, also joining me right now. Mr. Azad, let me start off with you. What does this indicate to you about the ground reality when even the judges aren't safe?
Let me give a context to it. First of all, it's the most horrible and shocking incident that I have come across, because I have never come across judiciary being hit like this. But in the state of Bihar, there has been, Dhanbad actually lies in the shadow of the coal mafia. And in the 80s and late 70s, there were a host of mafia rings in Bihar, from the Balu mafia to the sand mafia, to the water mafia, to the builder mafia, and the coal mafia. And there were names like Suraj Dev Singh, etc., were being, circulated. Let me also tell you that even one of the chief ministers in the late 80s in Bihar had to resign because he took a battle against the mafia. So that shows you the power of the mafia. I'm surprised. The first point I would like to make is that the very fact that a judge has been attacked shows that how emboldened the criminals can be and speaks volumes about the law and order situation machinery over there. Number two, what I'd like to say in this case is that it is extremely shocking that there is a district intelligence setup which should be fully aware of the mafia cases being dealt with by the judge, who was honest, who was straight, and how come this not percolate from there? There's a prosecution to the Superintendent of Police and the administrative setup that he should be given some kind of security, and also from the judge's office and the registrar, that how this was not informed to the police. So this is an extremely shocking incident, which I think there is a failure, there's a complete failure of the system and the administration as such, and therefore it needs to be probed at the highest level.
A probe at the highest level, that Mr. Supriyo Bhattacharya, shouldn't the government actually be saying that we'll bring in the best of the forces even if the premier investigative agency is needed to actually investigate this case? But before I go to him, let me also, for some more insights into this zone, go across to Professor Ajay Kumar Jha. Professor, right, like Mr. Azad said, back in the 70s and the 80s and even maybe the 90s, there was so much of this coal mafia and the sand mafia that ran havoc across these states. But one would assume that at least in 2021, the law and order situation is much better.
Yes, he was absolutely right. I do agree with him. Particularly Jharkhand area, it has been infested with crime since long. Actually, there was a time when I remember one of my friends who was SP there. He was killed by robbers. He was trying to face the criminals and he was shot dead. Ranveer Verma. So these things have been happening. The question really is what actually the administration is doing, what actually the political administration is doing. That's very important. This is giving a very bad example to other states also, to the criminals of other states also. Now, when judges will be shot down, this is going to give real bumps to everybody who is engaged in the law and order machinery, particularly when you have the government of your choice, when the young chief minister is already, he is there, he had an experience of handling this state even earlier also. So now at least he should be in position to look into the whole scenario, how his administration is actually doing. And we cannot blame any particular party because BJP and oppositions have switched over ruling this state from time to time in last 20 years when it was created in 2000. So I think this is a really serious situation. And moreover, what I'm actually just trying to point out that this state is a mineral-rich state. This is supplying the bigger chunk of mineral resources to this country. Everybody everywhere is eyeing this state. The mafias which have taken hold of so many things there, they are not letting it go out of their hand. So I think these things are quite known. It is in public domain, and there must have been some particular strategy to handle with it. And overall, if you see, some opposition parties have also started talking things, but then everybody is responsible. Not one political party can be blamed. But since right now, whosoever is there in the power, he will be directly blamed for this.
Yes, well, at least they need to ensure that there is some kind of accountability and action is taken, Anshul Avijit, because this is not acceptable at all. Now, I was looking at many of the cases, crucial cases. I gave one example. There's another example of how he was hearing the sensitive murder case of Ranjay Singh, a close confidant of one of the former MLAs, extremely powerful. He also went on to deny bail to another accused who is the prodigy of a famous Uttar Pradesh shooter. Obviously, these judges on a daily basis are handling extremely important, sensitive criminal cases because that's what the setup is, Anshul. But if the criminals begin to think that it's, they are above law to the extent that they can start bumping off judges, then we are in trouble.
No, Tanvi, absolutely horrendous. I'm completely outraged. I'm completely shocked. I mean, I can't give a political reaction to what has happened because it doesn't warrant any sort of political reaction. It's extremely shocking. It's condemnable to the limit. As Rajiv Ranjan, who is the advocate General appearing before the Jharkhand government in the High Court, has said, extremely sensitive case. There will be a speedy probe into the case and justice will be served. An SIT has already been formed, a 14-member SIT of the ADG. I mean, of course, you can always talk about CBI inquiries and all that, but there is nothing to show at the moment that the case is not being handled professionally. But in the larger picture of what the context which has been brought out about the state itself, too early to speculate on the nature of the killing. I mean, I believe that 2 people have even been arrested in this regard. I do not know what the nature of the killing was, why it was done, what happened, what kind of failures were there in the process that led to the killing. This will all come out in the investigation, and I'm as keen as everyone else to get down to the bottom of this. This is completely unacceptable. It's too early to speculate. You gave a background of the kind of cases that he was handling at the moment, but I do not know any kind of direct connection. Yes, it has had a history of kind of mafia-dom in that particular region, but also in the last couple of years, there's been an which has been actually settled at the moment, which was increase in the law and order issues because with regard to tribal rights as well. When the last BJP government started instituting or started meddling in tenancy laws and enforcing them on tribal rights, there was a lot of protests. A lot of people were booked under sedition acts. We mustn't forget that background. When Hemant Soren came in as the chief minister, he tried to settle that. But I must say now that he's been there for 2 years. This particular incident has certainly sent shockwaves. I can't dispute that at all. It's highly unfortunate, very condemnable, and I wish that they get down to the bottom of this very quickly.
Tuhin, what's your take on these kind of developments? Can we blame just one sitting government, or it's collectively the failure on being able to get a handle on these things in this state?
I can easily go back a good 50 years because I know the region better than many others. But that would be providing a very convenient escape route to Hemant Soren. Let's face it, a JMM government in Jharkhand is synonymous with lawlessness and increasing crime in much the same way that Lalu Yadav's government was in Bihar during the 1990s and Samajwadi Party's government was in Uttar Pradesh. Now, this is not an isolated case. This is probably, the audacity with which the murder was carried out. I think, if a proper investigation is carried out, you might as well get to know that the video was supposed to be meant to, intimidate other judges or other businessmen. That is how, much of JMM operates. And this is not an isolated case. Just 2 months ago, a sub-inspector by the name of Rupa Tirki in Sahibganj was similarly murdered in very mysterious circumstances. And for a good, first few days, her murder was passed off as suicide. Why? Because the representative of the local MLA was involved in some way. And eventually, of course, the state government was forced to order an inquiry. So crimes against women. Last December, there was a gang rape where 17 people were, raped a woman in Dumka. Again, it took a lot of time for the government to even order an inquiry or initiate the next steps. The fact is, the silence of the present CM of Jharkhand gives some sort of an indication to criminals that they have an easy hand. And unfortunately, the Congress does not condemn this soft attitude towards criminals. The CM is more involved in taking petty pot shots on the Prime Minister on Twitter. But when it comes to these, has he ever instituted a fast-tracked inquiry in the previous 2 cases that I mentioned? Even at this point of time, had it not been for the intervention of the Jharkhand High Court and now the Supreme Court, the matter would, they would have tried to brush the matter under the carpet. That is the attitude of the JMM, unfortunately.
Well, I do want to say that, usually the JMM and the Jharkhand government is extremely accessible to us. And today we were going to have a representative of the JMM, but at the last minute, The guest seems to have backed out, so I have no option at all to get any answers from Mr. Soren's party on what is going on in his state. Yes, Mr. Azad, you wanted to make a point?
I just want to reiterate what I said. The shadow of the coal mafia runs across the parties. There has been no difference at all. And I know perhaps more than even Mr. Tuhin Sinha, and he also knows. I belong to Jharkhand. I belong to that district, Godda, one of the most backward districts of Jharkhand. And he and I know what happens in Dhanbad. Dhanbad really is in the cradle of the coal shadow. And across the parties, the same things have happened. And the same things happen also in case of investigation, because they are not brought to its logical end, and that's why they always escape. And that is why in cases like this, high-profile cases, the drivers are used, henchmen are used, or the shooters are used. And that's why I'm extremely happy that if the High Court has taken notice of this particular case and is hell-bent upon finding the right culprit, it reaches the door of the coal mafia, because I don't understand any other reason as to who else would like to kill the judge. The judge was handling extremely sensitive cases. He was handling the bail cases. He was handling the murder cases. And therefore, it was also incumbent upon the district administration and the intelligence to find this out, thread out this perception, and give him some kind of security. Tanvi, mind you, there are two kinds of security. One is based on threat, and the other is based on positional. Positional security is being given to the High Court judges and also the Supreme Court judges by the center, and it is absolutely all right. But the district judges have not been given security unless on threat perception, and that is why that has to be based on the district intelligence authorities. My next point is that in a place like Jharkhand or even in Bihar, there is a thing called technology which can, take care of very, very simple things. But unfortunately, there is no stress on any kind of a budgeting for security. Bihar and Jharkhand are the only two states now which don't have any police commissioner system. They don't believe in it. They believe in a Dehati rural system which continues since the 1861 Act. A place like Dhanbad, for which a demand has been made for last 40 years, I think, for a police commissioner system, it has not come across. There are no CCTVs. And mind you, this happened at Randhir Verma Chowk. He was a senior colleague of mine who, how he died? He died because there was a bank dacoity which was going on, and he went and he got shot over there. So with this history of Dhanbad, with this kind of a coal mafia history, if today this thing is happening, it means that it is being perpetuated. And we have to sit together, not do these party battles, but sit together and see how to make our cities more safe and secure for common man. Look at this judge who was such a wonderful man and who died just because of his honesty and integrity.
Tuhin?
No, I completely agree with Mr. Azad. The problem of coal mafia has existed since the 1990s.
Correct.
But I just want to ask him, in the last 5 years from 2014 to 2019, how many of such murders have taken place? The fact is, crimes across, all kinds of crimes, whether it is rangdari, whether it is crimes against women, all increase. And it's a fact. You can check the data. The moment the JMM government comes in power, and I have seen this, I was there in 2019, December, during the campaign, I could sense a certain disenchantment with the people, with the BJP government, or else we would not have been out of power. But even then, in the urban pockets of Ranchi and Jamshedpur, people would dread a JMM government coming to power. That's a fact. And, when you see such crimes happening, that only validates the genuine concern which people have against a party like JMM.
But it is the people who voted the party to power.
No, it is people like Congress who supported through the back door to somehow cling to power and then not comment on the crimes which happened. The same is happening in Maharashtra, where crime of a different kind, the Vasuli gate, has increased.
Yeah, okay. Anshul Avajit and then Professor Jha. Yes.
No, the
Yes,
reason
actually-
why, Tanvi, that the Congress was voted to power was because they had enough of that BJP rule, which continuously went after the tribals because they were interfering with there is a double context to this. They were interfering in tenancy laws. They were actually colonizing their own territory. This is the habit of the BJP government. Mr. Tuhin Sinha, my friend, just went on and said about a long list of states which have been mismanaged. He forgot the most blazing example, which is UP, in which there's been an indictment by the High Court itself. The Allahabad High Court recently came out and said that there is genocide going in that state. So let's not go into the number of states which are terribly mismanaged. UP stands number one, by the way. The fact is that this government was voted into power because the last government was colonizing its own territory by compromising with tenancy laws and disregarding the rights of the tribals. And that's why it was voted into power. And the kind of abuse and the kind of injustice that was meted out to them in the kind of protest, the fact that they were booked under sedition law. Stan Swami, by the way, was one of them who was protesting vehemently. We've lost him under very, very tragic circumstances, but he was among them who was protesting against these laws.
I think
it was
it's
a government that was highly exploitative.
Well, I think it is very clear that over the years, the people and the state have been exploited by whoever was in power. It didn't really matter. Everybody colluded with the local mafia over there, with those who were looking to make money at the cost of people and the state's resources. But I want to go back to the point that Yashovardhan Azad was making, and Professor Ajay Kumar Jha. If there is a threat perception, which in a place like Dhanbad is going to be pretty obvious, should we not be having a system already in place for better security for at least our judiciary? How else are we going to expect them to be able to take fair decisions?
Yes, absolutely. That's true. But what I was trying to refer to, no ad hocism can work here. So no, I can recall there have been several police commissions instituted. They recommended in a quite detailed process how to reform policing, how to reform law and order and all that. But all of them have been washed out. So the real problem lies in the intent of the political parties and also the administrative officers at the same time, including police officers. So what I mean to say that any attempt to set it right cannot be done unless some real management is done on a larger issue, and ad hocism must go away. We have to work upon it. I think that one has to be very, very clear about it. And so far as the intent of political parties is concerned, it is seen everywhere. Not only the central government have been instituting several police commissions, even many of the state governments have also instituted, and nothing, all of them were washed out. And part of the implementations here and there just cannot do. It will have to be brought on all India level, and then only some kind of synchronization can happen, and things can be brought to some particular level. Every year, in the Crime Report Bureau has been giving the status of crime in this country. In the state-wise data is coming. Actually, those data can also be doubted because those data must not have been giving the right picture. Must have been giving only the lesser picture, as it must have been happening in reality. But even if that is there, even if you could control that also, nothing serious is seen anywhere. I think this should be taken on a larger basis. Courts should be brought into it, and if courts are really serious, they should go for it, and they should instruct government. Central Supreme Court can also intervene. They can take things suo motu also. I think this needs a larger attention.
Well, I must say that the Supreme Court Bar Council did raise this issue. In fact, the matter was mentioned in front of two Supreme Court judges, including the Chief Justice and Justice Chandrachud. Of course, the Supreme Court at this point has said that since the Jharkhand High Court has already taken cognizance of the matter, the Jharkhand High Court has said that they're going to be tracking the investigation on a day-to-day basis. I mean, what bigger indictment do we need, Mr. Azad, of lack of trust in investigative authorities when the court says we're going to look at it every day, and if it's not up to the mark, we will bring somebody else to do this job?
You see, the issue is, and I'd like to go back to it again. What happens is in crime investigation, there are two things here. One is the general law and order scenario, which is very, very fragile in a state like Jharkhand, or especially in big towns or even in rural areas, which are called even the Badlands. And it is compounded by the fact that the investigation is done in such a manner, there are a lot of loopholes left, and there are many key people who are just left out because obviously there is no evidence against them. So it needs a very sustained kind of a police pressure investigation against the mafia. Otherwise, the mafia stamp will never go from these two states. And I tell you, again, whether it's the sand mafia, whether it's the builder mafia, whether it's the cement mafia, or whether it's the, any coal mafia, they will not be wiped out unless you take up at least 15, 16 of these cases and just ram them through in areas like Dhanbad, Jharia, all the surrounding coal belt areas, and see them to the logical conclusion of getting them conviction. And mind you, with the kind of muscle, money, and power, they can go right up to the Supreme Court. And that is why it is extremely important that the people who are posted in these areas are a men of integrity, leadership, and commitment who can go through. It's not a job which small men can do. And I hope that the state government, for once, which may be not taking action because of whatever caste consideration or power consideration, can do it, taking the help of the court, because court is giving the backing, and put them all behind bars. That is the only way.
I would just say that the initial indications haven't been very encouraging at all. When the state government and the minister in charge for Dhanbad, and the health minister of the state actually turns around and says that we will see, let the truth come out after the investigation, too early to say anything. We have to see if it was pre-planned or an accident. I mean, one look at that visual and you know it is not an accident of any kind that early in the morning. Now, they've arrested the man who may be driving that vehicle, but obviously that's not where the investigation needs to stop. What I was mentioning earlier of how this case was also raised and mentioned in the Supreme Court today, I also want to go across to Mr. Vikas Singh, who is joining me on this conversation right now. Okay, we seem to have lost that line with Vikas Singh. I'm going to try and go back to him in just a bit. Let me also add to what was being said here about the state of affairs in Jharkhand. It has the highest murder rate in the country. In fact, since 2015, Jharkhand has had the highest murder rate, barring 2 years, where it was the second highest. That's been the state of affairs. And it's not just, crime over theft or personal vendetta. Many of these crimes, a large percentage of these crimes are actually also crimes that are murders that are actually for larger gains. That's the table right in front of you on your screens right now. Mr. Vikas Singh joins me this evening. Good evening to you, Mr. Singh. What does it say about the state of affairs in a state, in a city where a judge isn't safe and a high court has to say, we will now track your investigation every day or bring in the CPI?
Well, actually, Tanvi, firstly, there is no doubt that it is murder, because if you see the way he was hit from behind, if it had been just a simple hit, it would have been a couple of fractures in the body. When the postmortem was done, it was observed that when this fellow is going to hit him, actually he hits him on his head with a metal piece, and because of that head injury, he dies. So it's a clear case of murder. There is no doubt about it. Now, as far as the state machinery is concerned, I will say, I will not try to blame that it's the entire state machinery which is to be blamed, but it is the policing which is an issue in this country. And, I've always said and I've always maintained that unless we have police reforms in this country, this kind of thing is going to happen. Now, invariably, there are two very, very serious aspects of this matter. One, it is a brazen attack on the independence of judiciary, because we can't have an independent judiciary if our judges are, subjected to, or if they have this kind of a threat on them. Number two, it's a very, very serious issue of lack of intelligence. Now, most of the time when our police or our paramilitary, foil a terrorist attack, etc., we don't give them that much credit, because most of the time they act on intelligence and nobody reports them because nothing happens. This is a case where this must have been planned. They must have planned this route that this judge must have been taking. They must have hired these people. These are goons who have been hired. So the local police, every local police has to have its own intelligence gathering. There is a complete failure because it is impossible to guard every judge or every lawyer, because if this happened to a judge, it can happen to a prosecution lawyer as well. So it's not possible to guard everybody every 24 hours in this country. And it's such a big country, so many criminals are being. So the only way we can do it is by a proper intelligence gathering, and it's a huge failure according to me. Why I demand for the CBI is because I feel that somebody at the local level definitely is involved in this matter. And if that is so, we will never get a proper investigation. So the CBI only can do a proper investigation. And here we require a quick resolution, because if we don't do a quick resolution, our people of this country will lose faith in the institutions where people go for justice. Now, if a judge is to be scared in trying up a criminal, I really shudder to think it's a chilling effect in the entire justice administration system. And as head of the Supreme Court bar, I feel that it's my responsibility to ensure that I should not let this happen. And that is why I took all these measures in the morning, talked to the Chief Justice of Jharkhand first, and then mentioned before the Chief Justice of India. And then the Chief Justice of India said, and Chief Justice of India these days does not allow mentioning. But I still requested the Registrar General that this is something very, very important. And in between a matter, he took me and he heard me, and then he said that yes, we are equally concerned. And the Chief Justice of the High Court has already taken the matter on the judicial side. So it will be better that it be monitored from there rather than.
But do you believe, Mr. Vikas Singh, that a judicial monitoring, which is what is in place right now, will be enough, or should we not waste time and directly go in for at least an outside independent investigative agency to come and probe this? I mean, if at the end of the day, this is a message of threat and intimidation to the judiciary, to the officers of law, to the investigating officers, in the city of Dhanbad, then it's going to be very difficult for any team there to do this investigation.
I totally agree with you, Tanvi. So the SSP was also in the video conference when the Chief Justice was taking up the matter. So I have told the Chief Justice that if in a day they are not able to get to the mastermind or the man behind, then by tomorrow or probably day after, I will request for the matter to be transferred to the CBI. So these SSP is in that sense, he's under watch completely. And let's hope for a day. Let's hope what happens tomorrow. And if nothing happens, then I will insist for a CBI probe. And if necessary, move the Supreme Court again, because this is something which I feel we must take it up very strongly. And this is actually a threat to our democracy, because if the judiciary is to be attacked like this, then where will people go? I mean, the judiciary is the last refuge for the citizens of this country. And if the judiciary is under threat, it's a huge blow to the entire justice administration system in this country. And
oh yes, absolutely. I mean, it is shocking, and I began this show by saying that it's very, very not just disturbing, but it is scary when it begins to, when the judiciary of this country begins to get targeted like this. Thank you, Vikas Singh, for joining me. I have one more question to bring to Anshul Avijit on this matter, Anshul, because for me it's problematic when the state government doesn't think it's as dreadful as all of us think it is and needs to be treated as priority.
I don't think that was the intention. I mean, we're all shocked by this. I mean, I completely agree with the sentiment of Mr. Vikas Singh. There can be no doubt about it. If the judiciary is threatened and, bumped off in this manner, then, the future is really bleak in that sense. So we want to get down to the bottom of this. I agree with him. There should be a speedy trial here. We should get down to the bottom of this. But I think that the time is not now to completely suspect the police all the time. Let them do their job. They've acted with alacrity here. They've acted with purpose here. Give them 2 days. Even he said, give them a couple of days to do their job. They've acted with promptness at the moment. Give them time to complete their job.
The problem is the minute you make a statement, the problem is the minute you make a statement where you say we have to see whether it was pre-planned or accident, you're already giving space to the investigative authorities and sending a message to them to say, oh, you have the leeway to say it was an accident, and here is the auto driver who was behind the steering.
No, that was a technical statement. The investigation is not complete. I mean, it's not a conclusive statement. I mean, the rest is all about the mafia, and all I completely agree. The background is robust. We all know about the background of Jharkhand in that sense. I mean, I've spent a lot of time there. I mean, Tuhin has, Mr. Azad have spent months in Dumka, in Pakur, in Godda, in Sahibganj. I've spent months there. I know that area very, very well. I know the background of that place. I've done my research there. So, I'm well aware of that, of Jharkhand. Let the police, give the police a couple of days to react to the situation. This is a very ghastly incident. There can be no doubt about it. It is highly condemnable. Give them time. We want to get down to the bottom of this, because if judges are targeted, it is extremely unfortunate for our democracy. All I can say is give it a couple of days and we'll get down to the bottom of this. And I want to see, I want the culprits to be brought to justice as quickly as possible.
Last comment from Tuhin before we wrap this up.
Anshul is a good guy. Obviously, his party doesn't think the same way, because they can do anything to cling to power. Has the state Congress even condemned the incident till now, or demanded a better handling of the law and order situation in Jharkhand? Because we all know for a fact, and just to make one more point, see, Anshul was speaking about the tribal issues which Jharkhand had during our time. In fact, and Mr. Azad was mentioning about different kinds of mafia. The fact is that one mafia which gets unnoticed every time JMM comes to power is the conversion mafia. And so a lot of the issues, a lot of the problems in the tribal areas, they openly, you haven't traveled well across Jharkhand if you say that. Just travel
I know the issues very well.
To Khuti and the south Jharkhand, you probably travel more in the north Jharkhand. But the way...
No, I've been to Chakradharpur, I've been to Chaibasa, I've been to Singhbhum, I've been everywhere.
Creates a lot of problems and leads to crime in tribal areas. That's a fact. You can verify it yourself.
Okay, but let's get back to the case at hand and what the messaging here is. One last question to Mr. Azad. Mr. Azad, if there is an actual intention of going right up to the top, whoever the culprit is, the most dangerous of the kind, mafia, if it at all that is, should the police have not begun to round up at least the big names in that zone, at least start calling them in, questioning them? A judge has been bumped off. At least the message from the police has to be that this is not acceptable.
If anybody knows the history of Bihar and Jharkhand, they would know that even the topmost leaders who were against mafia were kicked out. The best of the officers were kicked out. The bureaucracy was moved out. So in this case, because an honorable judge has been killed, I'm happy that the Supreme Court has put its might behind it. And therefore, it looks like that in this case, it will reach the top. And we must get those people who are actually behind this. And for once, the fangs of the mafia will be exposed. So it is not necessary to round them up right now. It is necessary to thread the investigation in such a manner that it actually leads to the right place, and then they can be rounded up properly. And I hope this happens, and I'm sure it will happen, because once any investigation is outside the realm of politics, it really becomes a good investigation. And with the court prodding, I'm sure it will be one.
Well, I just want to make one point that I have now seen, whatever my limited experience is, that unless and until it becomes the biggest talking point, the biggest outrage and the headline in our country, unless and until it grabs the attention of the national media and the national political parties and becomes an issue that gets raised in the parliament, it's going to just die a very quick death without the investigation going anywhere.
Can I just share a very interesting anecdote with you?
I am completely out of time, Tuhin. I'm really sorry, but I have one more conversation which I think is also important that I must address. Maybe another time. This issue is far from over. The limited point that I am making here is that unless and until we raise this issue again and again and again, unless and until each political party, each civil society big name, each parliamentarian, each big media house picks this up and asks this question, it's going to be just one of those stories that gets forgotten in a day, and the investigation goes nowhere, and the life of a judge would have been lost. If we are truly serious, and the parties are truly serious, then they need to make as much noise as they do for any other issue inside the parliament as well. And we need to, as media, give it the due attention. A judge who went out for a morning walk never came back home. Such is the brazenness of criminals in Jharkhand. This is where we need to draw the line. Thank you for joining us.